the Executive Committee meeting of Community Board 2. I remind you all that tonight's meeting, as is our custom, is being recorded. And so that's your warning. I'll introduce the Executive Committee of Community Board. We have Mr. Leonard Jordan, who serves as our first vice chair. We have Barbara Zala-Gringer, who's our second vice chair. We have Jessica Thurston, who serves as our secretary. And for all of those who may be participating for the first time, we are the Executive Committee as elected by the Board of Community Board 2. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So move.
Mr. Meyer, second by Mr. Gordon. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Usually, you know, these are the times.
Opposed?
Two meetings, I mean, 3 committees on the community.
Any abstentions? Great. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes of December 2021? Should you have any comments or edits, I'd ask that you send them into the board office. Seeing no further indication of edits, all in favor of the minutes for December 2021? So raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you. Chairperson's report. So, you know, as always, I try to keep it brief, but I do want to really kind of touch base and check in. I know that we are engaging in a different format that is allowing for the community to give their comments at the beginning. And while we don't have a full-fledged template that we've implemented across the board, I do know that many committees, if not all, should be implementing this period. Again, just to serve as a reminder, this is a period that allows the community to be able to speak and give their input before we as board members begin to have our dialogue and deliberations on how we're going to vote and things that we're going to support. And so just from the chairs that are here tonight, and if there's a co-chair sitting in place of a chair, just briefly want to know how's it going, if there are any things that we've learned, things that Carol Ann, Tay, and myself need to adjust, but just some basic feedback would be helpful, and I will keep it brief. Sid.
Well, you know, we are not using exactly that format. When we have a presentation, we allow the public to speak on that presentation before or any item. We ask them to speak to the item, and then, you know, so that it runs in a much more logical sense. And then at the end, we also have the open comment period where people can say whatever they want and bring whatever concerns they want. And I find that that's more efficient. If you open it up at the beginning for general comments, it really doesn't get directly related to the agenda item. And we've been doing that. And we've had people comment, but it seems to be working fairly well. And I don't think that's any different than we used to do in the past.
Thanks. Anyone else?
That's Lenny. I find that for the ULURP hearing that we just had, that it is unwieldy. Now, what we're doing on this instance is actually sort of an opposite situation. We open up the ULURP hearing, we get the presentation, and then we get the comments as we normally would get from the public. However, because of the controller's requirements, the committee members and board members cannot address the presenter until we have closed the hearing. And then when we get into the regular meeting part, we can then address the presenter as to what concerns or questions or that we may have. So it has become an unwieldy situation right now. We always were used to having the presentation, we'd speak with the presenter, we allow the public to make their comments since the public hearing, and then we would then later finish it up and make the vote. So the new system is a little unwieldy, especially for ULIP hearings. For the rest, we've been trying to get people to come in and speak about the items. So far, it's worked a little bit, but again, it is a bit unwieldy, especially since we do have a open forum anyway. But we have to try to work things out, I think, better.
So that's helpful. What I'll say to that is, let's not forget that a public hearing shouldn't require any change, because it is just that, a public hearing. You're hearing from the public. If it in fact is, and the ULIP hearings should also have some component where you are also hearing from the public and the community. I would
Yes,
also
we
suggest
still
that
do.
let's not lose sight of the fact that when you get comments from the community, they don't necessarily need to have a response in all cases. A lot of times you're just taking the information and you're making minutes of it, and it's things that you can refer to when the committee is actually having their dialogue, right? And so I recognize that some of what I'm saying may just be repetitive. I know that you all may be aware of that, but I don't want to lose the spirit of what I started out with at the beginning of the year. I want to be mindful of time. And to me, that is the paramount of what I'd like for us to focus on and work through for this year, and taking into account the information that has been revealed as part of the controller's audit. One of the things that I'd like to do, and we will do, is at the right time, I'll work with the board office and we'll have someone come in and we will do a Q&A to make sure that we get this process understood. As with some of the chairs and co-chairs, some of you have already reached out to me and there have been different interpretations of how you perceive what the feedback has been. But we will have an opportunity to have a Q&A and get some more solid direction so that we can be on the same page and unilaterally implement the right process so that the community can be heard and we can make the right decisions based on their feedback when it's time to vote. Bill.
Yeah, basically the way I would do it is for any type of presentation, I have the individuals in the public audience, if they have any questions, to put it in chat. And if I see it, I'll then ask that question. If there's any comments that they want to make after we've actually have the presenter has actually given presentation and the committee members have asked their questions, and any questions that hit the chat, I ask that. If they have any comments, I ask them for comments, but no responses to those comments unless the presenter wants to make a comment about that. As far as any other details, if there's a vote that has to be made and someone wants to comment about the vote, I'll let the public actually make comments on that before we actually vote.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, listen, thank you all for the feedback.
Benny, can I say something?
Actually, Esther, no, I'm sorry,
Okay.
you can't at this point.
All right.
But I can't stop you from putting it in the chat. So put whatever you want in the chat.
And you can speak to me, Esther, at any time.
Yeah.
Send me an email. And
I just want to get a brief feedback.
Mr. Gordon, it's nothing to do with you. Nothing.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a brief
All right.
feedback. I don't want to make it an actual agenda item since it is on the chair's report. And that's not something I want to engage with. So Sid, you're going to have to hold your question. I got what I needed. Thank you. We're going to move this along. So thank you for that. Please feel free to put any feedback you have in the chat. And as always, you can email me or call me. You all have my information. We can talk about it offline. Because I don't want to discuss it now doesn't mean I don't want to discuss it ever. So thank you for that. Number two, I wanted to just remind each of you that as chairs and co-chairs, I am the community board, the executive committee, and the community would not be able to have an effective use of our voice if it weren't for all of you. And so I appreciate everyone's dedication and passion. However, as we think outside the box and we start to do things that are helpful I never want to quell or quash anyone's creativity, but there are bylaws that we have to follow. And so to that point, you cannot go out and create your own subcommittee. That cannot happen. You cannot go out and create your own ad hoc group to have small private conversations. We are still governed by the city charter. We are governed by the open meeting law, and we do have a framework that we need to follow. However, if you do have an idea, but it's something that you think would help benefit the community or even members of your board or your committee, your committee, please have the dialogue. I'm all about communication and conversation. Reach out to me. Together with myself, Carol Ann, and the executive committee will figure it out. If not, we have to, take consultation from our parliamentarian, or if we need to get feedback from an agency that can help us handle it out, for example, like the Corporation Council, we can do it. We know who our delegate and our liaison to the community board is. If we need a translation, we can. So please continue to keep the ideas and the passion going. I just ask that you work through the board office and myself so that we make sure that we're adhering to the framework that's been set forth for community boards. The last thing I want to mention is that today, and I think this will come out in a greater context, but today we did two things. One, we've really moved ahead and made a decision on how we're going to proceed with the interview process for the replacement of the district manager. And so to fill the position, that's the right way to say it, fill the position of district manager. And Mr. Jordan will set aside some time during committees to report to update, everyone on how that process is going. And then I am also going to reach out to members of the entire community board, but particularly I bring it up to the attention of the executive committee that I will have a bylaws committee, ad hoc bylaws committee created, because it's time to revisit the bylaws. I think we've learned a lot through the pandemic. We've learned, even as we sit to this day in a virtual meeting space. So I want to just take a quick review of the bylaws and just wanted to announce to the executive committee, and I'll also do it to the full board, that we I'm going to ask for a bylaws committee, as we've done in the past, to help make sure that our bylaws are current and things that we've learned, so we can continue to move in a direction that is beneficial, not only for us as a framework for how we engage, but also to keep our meetings and our organization running smoothly. So with that, those are the updates and the things that I wanted to mention tonight as part of the chairperson's report. And then there's some other things that are happening, in particular to Abolitionist Place, some conversations that took place today as well. But I'm not in a position to give any greater detail. Just know that we're still engaging and having conversations for the best solution for the community. And we're still working to make sure that the location that's been identified as Abolitionist Place is met with the highest form of dignity, class, and respect for that sacred and hallowed ground. So more to come on that with greater details than just the high-level statements I just made. So more to come on that shortly. So with that concludes my chairperson's report. Carol Ann, Taya, is there anything that I missed that I was supposed to mention? If you don't say anything, I'll be happy with that. If you do, I'll welcome the comments.
Hi, Lenny. Hi, everyone. Dwight Smith sent in a report this afternoon, so you may not have had a chance to see it, on an update on the Pacific Park Atlantic Yards project, and also highlighting the charrettes that are being currently done by Brooklyn Speaks. I will share that report with the board, with the committee and the board. No need to go through the whole thing right now, unless you want to.
Thank you, Carol Ann. Because everybody didn't get a chance to really go through it, I think we'll wait and give everybody a chance to review it. And if you have comments, by all means, we don't have to wait for an executive committee meeting. Just feel free to shoot emails or communicate, and we can answer and address any questions that you may have. Next item on the agenda, item number 5, committees for action. Our first committee to present this evening is land use. And Mr. Carlton Gordon is chairperson.
Thank you, Lenny. Thank you, Lenny. All right. I've just been informed by Carolyn Church that we have a new committee member, Yvette Richardson, who is an engineer. So that's wonderful news. I also have an affordable housing announcement. 196 Willoughby Street, 196 Willoughby Street, which is inside the Long Island University, is a affordable housing, part of an affordable housing program. And they are now taking applications according to the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership. It's been built by RXR Realty, and they're looking at 143 rent stabilized units. So you may want to pass on that there is an affordable housing opportunity right here right just about in the middle of downtown Brooklyn. Okay, now we'll move on to the ULURP application. That was ULURP C200-335 ZMK and 200-336 ZRK. This is for 98 3rd Avenue, aka 300 Bergen Street. And the application was to tear down and eliminate the Shell gas station that has existed at that location for many years, and to build a new, let's say, residential and commercial structure. It'll be 8 stories, 24 dwelling units, approximately 28,000 square feet. It'll also have commercial space along the Bergen Street side. They plan to have 17 1-bedrooms, and yes, and then the rest will be 8 2-bedrooms. For the affordable housing part of that group, it'll be 4 1-bedrooms and 2 2-bedrooms. It will be a nice brick face with glass structure. Again, we'll have commercial spaces available, although they just have the space that's open. And we also heard from which is since it's right on the edge of Boerum Hill at Bergen and 3rd, we heard from Howard Collins of the Boerum Hill Association, who liked what they saw. It is a nicely done structure with a little bit of a setback. It gives the people a little bit of space to have a little area. I don't call it a garden area, since it'll be upstairs, I think up on the 6th floor, but it'll be a space for people to walk, for those who live in the building will have a little space to walk about. After the decision, after discussion rather, we voted in favor of it, 7 in favor, 1 no, and 2 abstentions. Now, I'll ask the chair, do you want to continue with the rest of the work, or do we want to go to roll call for affirmation at this time?
No, let's pause and discuss this recommendation to DCP, and then the landmarks items we'll take later.
Okay.
So let me start with, I'll entertain a recommendation in support of the committee's presentation. Ms. Barbara Zala-Gringer, second, Mr. Leonard Jordan. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, since it was a gas station, did they discuss like remediation of the ground soil, et cetera? Because we know that those areas can be toxic.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes, there will be remediation. They have, in fact, they must do remediation first before they get the final approvals to tear it down and build a building there. So they are currently in contact with the City Department of Environmental Protection, and they must remediate before they can even get all the applications permits to approve and to begin to build. But yes, there must be remediation prior to anything else happening at that site, or tearing it down.
Thank you.
Yes.
Jessica?
Hello. I just wanted to, I have a question and a statement. The statement is just, I think we might not actually vote on this here, but rather at the board. And so I know we have a motion, but I don't know how we want to handle that. And then do you want to
I
respond?
was wondering,
You're right.
I know that normally we do it before the full board, but I guess the chair, feels that since we act for the full board, I don't know if it's a time constraint. I am not aware of I know the clock is always ticking on these things.
I don't think on this.
Yeah, I don't know if it's one that we must do at this meeting or it's to be held to the full board or not.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not aware that this needs to be voted on tonight.
Okay.
It does go before the full board, but
Perfect.
I wanted to have some level of dialogue and a discussion about
Okay.
it before I went to the full board. So I went through the process of a motion based on the committee's recommendation.
Okay.
Just for clarity, as our secretary has pointed out, it is going before the full board before it's actually moved.
Right.
I just wanted to have some dialogue and conversation about it this evening.
Cool. Thanks. I just wanted to clarify that. And then my question, Carlton, or I don't know if Dr.
Yeah.
Was just, was there discussion at the committee about that being a very small number of affordable units? Was that sort of,
This is,
was that
well,
discussed? I
again,
guess that's sort of a question.
yeah. We're only dealing with 24 altogether.
Yeah.
It's 24 units, so it's a
That's
what
fair.
about a third, again, it's four 1-bedrooms, two bedrooms out of
It's 6 of the
24.
24, right? So it's
Yeah,
quarter of it.
this is not one of these Flatbush Avenue things that go up for the next 3 miles. This is a
Yeah.
little more moderate.
I just would always like more affordable housing. Thank you though for clarifying.
It's no, they did a lot of work even on the affordable housing. They gave us a full presentation, and they know that it's important, and they've set aside a fair number of units for the affordables.
Bill?
Yeah, we had a discussion about this, and one of the things that happened initially was there's a little confusion because we thought there were going to be 8 affordable housing units. They gave us 2 options. The first option was 6, and the second option was 8. They didn't even bring up the second option of 8 affordable housing units. They said we're shooting for the first selection of 6. And I brought the comment of why then include this. And the feeling was, my feeling was that if in fact we're hoping that this doesn't happen because we try to lock them in for the 6 because they're at the lower price levels. The 8 are at a higher price level. So we wanted to lock them in at the lower price level of 6. So when we did the motion, we said we wanted it with this option 1, not option 1 and 2. We just said option 1. And we also asked them why were they not building higher, because they had the option to put on 2 more stories. And they said because of the FAR, they actually wanted to keep it lower.
That's correct, Bill. It said they they felt that it would be more reasonable. And also I think it's the rents, well, whoever comes in under the affordables, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that under option 1, the rents are even more affordable than they would be under the second option. So that's why I think they decided to go with the first option, to just go with the 4 1-bedrooms and 2 2-bedrooms, as opposed to the second option.
Bill, thanks for clarifying that. That was a helpful point for me, so thank you for that. Any other discussion on the motion?
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. One other thing is when we were doing remediation, we brought up the issue, there was a leak, okay, that they were aware of. So they have to do remediation for that. Okay, I asked them if they had done drilling yet, and they had as of yet, not done drilling, but they were aware that there was a leak prior, and they have to correct that. There is remediation that needs to be done on that.
That is correct, yes. But the main thing is that they still have to remediate prior to any, getting any approvals for permits to demolish and then build.
Any other discussion? So Jessica, let me just mention this. I want to amend the statement a bit. So I'm asking for a recommendation, which was moved and seconded, to take this presentation to the full board. That's the way I want to have it laid out so that there's no ambiguity. It's really clear. And that's why I wanted to have this discussion. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor, please either raise your hand or motion by the sign of aye. Anyone opposed? Is there any abstentions? Okay, great, thank you. Next item.
I'll be doing this again at the general meeting. All right.
We're just giving you practice. Next item, let's go.
Yeah, practice, yes. Okay, now we'll move on to the Landmark Preservation Commission applications. 294 Claremont Avenue was postponed by the applicant, and presumably they will present to us in February. So the next one will be 250 Cumberland Street in the Fort Greene Historic District. And the application was to do work at the stoop and the stucco. And basically they're going to be doing some nice work, basically just refixing and renewing the facades of the building. There was some concern from the Fort Greene community organization about the handrails. They wanted to try to get the new handrails to be metal and to be matching and the applicant agreed to it. We liked what we saw and we approved it 10-0-0. You want us to move on or should we? We'll move on at this point. We'll move on to the next one. Okay. And this is the one that we'll keep in mind. The next one is 1 Sydney Place, which is in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. Now, the application was to install new windows, door configurations. We were doing some work on the first and second floor of the building, replacing windows and construction, and they wanted to do new bulkhead. Now, one is I'll divide up what I'm going to say. First, we did like what we saw of the work. The work was, the proposed work was good. It fit the work of the building to be done, and we liked it. However, part of the application also is to convert this building from an 8-unit building, an 8-apartment building, to a single family building. And that's when I had, because of my previous work, I brought up a big problem. Let's take a moment on this. Any multiple dwelling of 6 or more units is a rent stabilized building. The tenants will have a right, those who are in occupancy in a building of 6 or more units have a right to stay as long, under the lease, and a right to a renewal of the lease as long as they are in, good standing and rent payments and all that. Our concern was that this is a rent stabilized building going from 8 to 1. So we did approve the application on this one 10-0-0, but with a condition, as Mr. Singletary had pointed out, I think from the previous meeting. The condition is that the owners must comply with rent control and rent stabilized regulations, so that any tenants who are in the building are still allowed to continue occupancy and to have leases if they so choose. They cannot be forced out. They are allowed to stay as long as their rights as rent stabilized tenants must continue. So we did approve the work we realized that we cannot, force them to do, this matter of rent stabilized, rent controlled tenants, but we did discuss this and they said it would be cooperative on this one, and we did approve that one. The last one, no, the next one is 175 Clinton Street, which is also in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. And it's interestingly right next door to on a bike by Atlantic Avenue, at the Key Food that's right by Atlantic and Clinton, just happens to be the Key Food that I go to on a regular basis. The work they want to do on that one, it's in a nice Anglo-Italian townhouse, and they want to do a lot of work on the front facade to put up some white paint at the windows and the roof, and they wanted to do some of the they were going to do some other work on, let's see what else we have here. Yeah, there was a lot of white that they wanted to put throughout the facade of the building, and provide visible, do some work also at the rear. Yes, they're going to do these nice rear small openings and balconies for the tenants who would be coming into the building, so they would have a little air out, let's say, on the garden side of the building. We like the work that was, and it was, it's going to provide open space. It'll give them a little bit of fixing up. Now, the Brooklyn Heights Association's only real concern was that there was a lot of white on the facade. The architect understood the concerns of the Brooklyn Heights Association, but said that this was specifically what the clients had asked for. In any case, we did approve it, actually 11-0-0 on this one. So we ask for your approval of all three items.
Okay. If the committee doesn't object, I'd like to pull out 1 Sydney Place separately, and then ask for a vote, unless there's an objection, on 250 Cumberland and 175 Clinton together.
So moved.
I get a second. Moved by Mr. Meyer. Can I get a second, Ms. Thurston? Any discussion on the approval of 250 Cumberland and 175 Clinton Street? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, either raise your hand or acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Are there any abstentions? Okay, great, so moved. I'll entertain a motion to accept the committee's recommendation for 1 Sydney Place. Moved by Mr. Jordan, second by Mr. Smith. Is there any discussion on the motion? Ms. Thurston?
I just would like to say that I will be voting against this. I just fundamentally don't believe in converting 8 units into a single family home in a neighborhood that's already so unaffordable. It is right across the street from my apartment, which I acknowledge, but that is not part of my decision. And I just wanted to ask, what was the timeline discussed? Because if they actually abide by this, those tenants could live there for a while. So I'm just curious how the timeline piece factored into the discussion.
I'm not so much of a timeline, is that if the tenants refuse, they're negotiating with the tenants right now.
Okay.
This is what the architect tells me,
Okay.
or tells told the committee. And the tenant does, whoever remaining tenants, they do have the right to continue to reside in that building as long as they, again, are in compliance. If they say to the owner, well, I want a lease renewal, I want to renew my lease, they must at least get at least a 1-year renewal, and continuing renewals with increases, of course, but they are entitled to a lease renewal until they leave. as long as they stay in the same unit, in the same building, they're entitled. And that's the thing that I was concerned about. Again, that because this is, it was not the best of situation. I know that a number of our committee members who are concerned about that. I personally am not happy to see units being shrunk, let's say the number of units being shrunk. I have lived in brownstones and smaller, and that's where I've had been able to get occupancy in getting a home, because they have a small brownstone does have a couple of units, and I was able to be a tenant in one of them. But yes, it was concerned, but we really we couldn't force them to do anything else other than to say, yes, please comply with the law. The tenants can stay as long as they want. If they do not accept, I guess, whatever buyout, which is what, I guess is what they're talking about. They must be talking about some kind of buyout of the tenants so that they'll again get a fully empty building. I don't know if it really answered your question directly, but that's the best I can give you.
It did, thank you.
Mr. Jordan?
I think Mr. Flournoy was before me, Mr. Singletary.
Mr. Jordan?
Okay. Mr. Gordon, if the tenants if one tenant or two tenants don't choose to leave, so then is this, if we approve this, does this go on? Is it undated, or do they have to come back to the committee again?
We've given them permission to start doing the work, or permission. We've given them our assent to say, yes, we like the work. The application really is about the work, the work, the facades, and the works throughout the building. At worst, they may get the permit going up the chain of command, up through LPC in the buildings. They may get permission to do the work, but the work will be done with the tenants in there.
Okay.
Again, I can't answer that specifically, but I'll say yes. The tenants can remain if they so choose, and they have a right to a lease, to live out the lease, and a right to a lease renewal. The tenants also have a option to say, okay, buy us out, or we'll make a deal with you, or whatever. That's the option that the tenants have. But as long, again, because it is an 8-unit building, it is a rent stabilized building, and we just wanted to insist that they follow the regulations for rent stabilized and rent controlled tenants.
Mr. Flournoy?
And I think Bill Flournoy had some,
Yeah,
but I'll
thank
leave
you,
that to Lenny.
Thank you, Chair Singletary. Okay. It was my understanding at the committee, okay, and I'm pretty sure it was discussed. Yes, we are concerned about the fact that it's an 8-family going to a 1-family. We did show a lot of concern about that. If in fact 4 of the apartments are still actually occupied, then they still have protections because it's 50%. But that's neither here nor there. Our committee had one thing to vote on. It wasn't about the protection of the rent-controlled tenants. It was about the design. Okay, that's what the committee was there to vote on, the design of the building. And on the design of the building, we approved it. There was no condition that they had to also abide by rent control laws. That was not a condition of the vote. It was a suggestion, but it wasn't a condition. That was my understanding, because we are not in control of that. Okay, the application was to do work on the building. We voted on that, and we made a recommendation or a consideration of the rent control status and things along those lines, but that wasn't part of the approval process. That was my understanding of the situation.
Well, I will say, as I did ask for an amendment of the approval. I let and maybe it's wasn't clear, but I did ask for an amendment, and I think it was approved by the maker of the motion.
I
didn't
believe
make
I was the maker of the
to
motion.
approve.
And I
Oh,
don't
you want to
believe I
make the
don't,
motion? I did ask for I did ask for an amendment on that one, a friendly amendment.
it was,
And
I
it
did not approve the friendly amendment.
You didn't-
Carolyn,
if-
could you double check that? Was I the maker of that motion? Do you remember?
I don't recall. I cannot recall.
Looking at the tape
But,
now.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So it's okay, Carlton, if you don't recall. That's the beauty of the tape. Barbara?
Yeah, someone said something about 50% of the tenants. Is there something that's triggered by that?
It's my understanding that if 50% of the tenants, for instance, if it's an 8 apartments and it was rent controlled, as long as 4 apartments are still occupied, okay, they still have protection for rent control.
So if it was less than
Actually,
50,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Okay.
again, this is neither here nor there. We're there to vote on.
Yeah,
this.
I know. It's we're getting into the weeds on rental laws, and I realize that we don't want to get into the weeds of it. That's not quite, it runs with the unit. So it's not a matter of how many rent control or rent stabilized units there are. It's the key thing is that you have a building that is 6 or more apartments. Once that magic number is hit, all the rental units are at least minimally rent stabilized units.
So Mr.
tenants
Gordon,
and
Mr. Gordon,
will be rent stabilized tenants and have a right to a lease until they leave.
Carlton,
That was my biggest concern.
Carlton, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's stop there. Thanks
Yes.
for that clarification. Carol Ann, before we move on, before I call on Mr. Meyer, do you have anything to add? Is there anything that we're missing from this conversation? Understanding of what we're actually voting on? And for those who are not clear on what we're voting on, the application has been posted in the chat by Taya. So as Carol Ann speaks, if you want to familiarize yourself on what we're voting on, that's what's in the chat.
I do not remember there being a condition applied because I remember going back and forth with Mr. Flournoy on the matter, whether it was this part of the recommendation or was it a suggestion. Because one of the committee members raised the point that the LPC would have no interest in our concerns regarding the tenancy at the building. So I believe Mr. Flournoy is correct. I couldn't pinpoint the part on the video, but that is my recollection.
All right, thank you. Mr. Meyer?
You know, my understanding, this is a landmarks issue. It's not a zoning issue and it's not a tenant issue. That the tenants, if the DHCR protects them, they'll have statutory rights that go beyond this. Whether they can be removed, whether they can't be removed, that's not an issue here. I mean, and you have to be careful in viewing these things. What we are asked to comment on is the landmarks. If you go beyond that and then that's what you do, that can easily be set aside in court. So I would suggest we stick to what we've been asked to do. What we've been asked to do is to either approve or disapprove a change, a landmark, I don't know, amendment, but a change that the Landmark Preservation Commission has to approve. I'm concerned about the tenants. That if the tenants have right to stay, that's separate and apart from anything we approve concerning the landmarks.
Thanks, Ed. Barbara, you get the last, well, you get the question, then Mr. Smith gets a question, then we're gonna.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking at the application. It does talk about conversion from 8-family to a single-family residence. So it sounds like they're asking for our approval to make that conversion.
But there's a distinction. Let me just make the statement. There's a distinction between voting for an approval to convert a structure from 8-family to single-family, than the process of removing families from a structure.
Okay, right.
There is that distinction. So I don't want to blur that fact.
Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
Smith, you're welcome.
Barbara took many of the words out of my mouth because it was the exact same thing that I was thinking about looking at it. Since it references conversion, I'm not thinking about it in the tenant context, but I'm thinking that I should look at it from the context of whether I approve of the conversion.
That's correct. That is definitely a suggestion of what lens you should be looking at this application from. Any other discussion? Okay, let me be clear about this. The motion I'm looking for, well, no, I already got the motion. So let me just repeat this. This is a motion to accept the committee's recommendation. You're voting on the committee's recommendation, which was 10-0-0. It was unanimous. That's what we're voting on. So with that, all in favor of the committee's recommendation, either raise your hand or acknowledge by saying aye.
So I'm just seeing Lenny, Bill, and Carlton. Am I missing anyone in favor? Okay, thank you.
Great. All those opposed, please raise your hand or acknowledge by saying aye. So I see Jessica, Mr. Smith, Ms. Fibush, and Ms. McKnight. Is that right, Jessica?
Yes, though I will say, unfortunately, Nicole, your vote does not count towards this because just one.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, yep.
So
And-
Brandon, me.
Brandon, Fibush, and Thurston. So
Okay.
Smith, Fibush, and Thurston. Are there any chairs that are abstaining? So I see Mr. Jordan, Ms. Gringer, and Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
So I see 3-3-3. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And Carolyn, what's the time on this?
I don't know when they come up at LPC, but usually they at LPC within a month of having come to us. Can I just say that even if we vote no, it's not going to count at LPC for the reasons that we're voting no.
So in that case, I don't need to really get an affirmative vote one way or the other. The vote can stand and just goes a recommendation to LPC.
Well, it didn't pass, right?
So I said it does. That's what I just said. It didn't pass, right?
Okay.
So Carolyn, am I right with that? Okay. All right. So I'm not going to go through the effort of taking another vote. What I'll do is make sure that in the response that we provide to LPC will be really specific in how the vote was carried out by the executive committee in our write-up to LPC. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gordon, and to the Land Use Committee. Appreciate the effort and the work that the committee put into the four items before them. We're up to agenda item number 6, committees to report. We're going to start with economic development and employment.
Okay, thank you, Chair Singletary. Okay, Bill Floyd, Chair of the Economic Development and Employment Committee. My co-chair, Denise Peterson, I believe she was here earlier.
She's here.
Okay, excellent. And also recognize my secretary, Catherine Gilman. I gave a full discussion at the full board meeting regards to the Grow Brooklyn presentation and also the impromptu presentation by Impact Brooklyn. So I'm not going to go over that again. We've already heard of everything I had to say about that. At the meeting, we also discussed the going forward with the district statement of needs. We're looking to finalize our final product by the end of May, June to actually present to the board office so you can move forward with that over the summer. And also we're looking at the past recommendations we gave. We want to see what in fact we got back as far as responses to those recommendations for district statement of needs from the different organizations and see whether or not this is something we want to also address going forward. And I also want to review the April 2021 meeting that we had with the bids. We had all the bids actually come to our committee and give us recommendations, what's going on as far as the economic development, as far as recovery from COVID. we want to actually have them come back again, March, April, to again give us a presentation to see what's going on as far as the economic recovery due to COVID. So we're going to actually have them present again if possible. And then between those two things, actually do put together a district statement needs from that. I also asked individual committee members, everyone has their own particular interest that they're interested in. So I asked them to put together a little presentation on why we should take a look at these things going forward so that we can actually address them. If it's something that we feel we should do, then we'll actually ask presenters to come in and discuss that. As an example, I asked one of the committee members to take a look at the MWBE situations as far as what we have going on within the district, and then present that to us as a presentation going forward. That individual is actually very interested in that, and other committee members have also interest accordingly. But as long as it was something within our purview, I do not want to go outside of our purview, staying within our purview. Okay, and finally, I just want to give a shout out to two people. Cyril Scala had an article in the New York Times, okay, which I thought was awesome. It was an article on January 14th. I gave him a big heads up on that. And I also want to thank Taya for all the work that she's done as far as getting our presenters to our committee. The next committee meeting is going to be February 1st. Currently, right now, we don't have a confirmation to the actual presenter, but I'd like to see everyone to come to our meeting on February 1st. And that's my what's going on.
Thanks, whatever it was you just gave. Thanks, I appreciate that. Next committee to report is Finance and Personnel, Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Singletary. Hi, everybody. The Finance and Personnel Committee met on January 14th, specifically to discuss, so we did go over the minutes from our previous meeting, but specifically to discuss the resumes that we received in the interview process and the format and everything else. We are going to meet again, all right, in order to finalize exactly who we're going to be interviewing, the dates and the times, so that everybody in the committee is on the same page. And with that, I will probably report back as to what the results were. And we may have, let me just put it this way, as to when we're going to start the interviews, and then we'll see how things go from there. Most of that meeting was in executive session, so there weren't any minutes that were, distributed to anybody. That's about it at this point, Mr. Singletary.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Next committee to report is Health, Environment, and Social Services.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Brandon Smith. I'm Chair of Health, Environment, and Social Services. I'm honored to be joined by my co-chair, Nicole McKnight, as well as the secretary, Jessica Thurston, here tonight. We had a really nice meeting on January the 4th, which we have in great detail in our minutes. Ms. Church was skilled enough to get us some excellent speakers, specifically Dr. Olusembo Ige, the Assistant Commissioner from Department of Health in charge of community engagement, and Chelsea Cipriano, who is their Executive Director for Intergovernmental Affairs. We had a discussion, which is primarily a follow-up to a discussion last year about the Department of Health's lessons learned from COVID-19, but trying to really drill down more on disparities that we've seen as our committee constantly gets these updates on 11201, which has very high incidences of vaccination and lower incidence of cases and deaths, and 11205, which has much higher statistics that are not what we want to see, and hopefully try to figure out what's going on between the two different neighborhoods. So we had a good discussion about that. We got a number of different tips and feedback about what they feel are the different reasons why there's vaccine hesitancy, for example. And we talked a bit about some of the community-based organizations that they're working with, and we're probably going to try to follow up with some of them in some future meetings to really kind of drill down and make sure that there's the kind of engagement that we would expect. The Department of Health seems to feel like these organizations are are working in the local communities like in 11205. But we want to make sure that we're fully informed about what's going on with them and that they're doing what they need to do. They provided us some info. 212 COVID-19. If you call that number, you can get free at-home test kits. We couldn't cover everything that you could possibly want to cover in that. It was about an hour and 20-minute discussion with them. But I think it was valuable for the folks who attended, and hopefully we're able to pick some good things up out of it. We also heard from a couple of liquor licenses that we discussed at the general meeting, which were approved. And we had a discussion about district needs where each member of the committee is going to kind of take a policy subject and try to drill down on a specific district need or two that gets at the capital and expense nature of the policy goal. Looking forward, I think we're trying to continue our theme of climate change this year and hoping to target presentation on composting in the near future. And we'll look forward to seeing more folks at our meetings in the future, and be happy to take any questions on my report.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Next committee to report is Parks and Recreation.
I think Mr. Flanoy had a question for Mr. Smith.
Bill?
Oh, sure thing, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. Mr. Smith, I'm just kind of curious if in fact I'm having a problem with a bar, okay? And is it possible to reach out to you to ask you that when that bar comes up for renewal for their liquor license, that I get a heads up on that so I can actually comment on that?
So before you answer, Mr. Smith, wouldn't you get a heads up if you read what comes out of the district office when they list the presenters and who's going to be on the agenda for the meeting?
Normally I do, sir. Actually, completely. But I was also looking at if there's anything I can do preemptively.
That's my only comment. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Well, as the chair points out, we do advertise the items from month to month, but at the same time, I don't get these kinds of things so often, and honestly, I feel like the more that I hear about it, the more informed I am. So, feel free to reach out to me, Bill, if there's something that you're concerned about, and when it comes up on the committee's agenda, or if there's something really urgent going on, we'll discuss it with the board office and see what other kinds of ways there are to deal with it. Very sensitive to those kind of issues, and we've dealt with many of them over the years in the course of the committee, and no two are always the same. So we'll look forward to working with you.
Next committee to present, Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Mr. Singletary. I'm Barbara Zoller-Gringer, and my co-chair, Andrew Lastawecki, is here this evening. Good to see everyone tonight. I did report on our meeting at the general meeting, but just briefly, our committee is, as we speak, looking at other community boards to see what, if anything, what, if any other topics are being viewed at the same time with parks. So the committee is Parks and Environment or Parks and Cultural Affairs. So committee members are going to report back. And I was glad to hear the chair talk about a bylaws committee, because this might be an appropriate subject for the bylaws committee to look at the different committees we have now and see if there should be any change in their jurisdiction, the matters that they're looking at. And Mr. Smith mentioned composting and climate change, and those are certainly two issues that our committee is also interested in as they affect parks. So so that was basically what we were discussing, and we also took some time to talk about thinking about other meetings and the statement of needs and how we're going to go about preparing for that. Thank you. And our next meeting is Valentine's Day.
Next committee to present, Transportation and Public Safety.
Good evening. I'm Sid Meyer. I'm the chair. We don't have a co-chair. And we had our meeting was on the 20th, which was last week, and we had a fairly lively meeting as we were trying to plan for what we should prioritize on issues for the next 6 months. I presented information on how we can get statistical information so that we back up anecdotal stuff with real hard numbers of what's going on. And we're going to try to see if we can work out some way of being much more proactive. We have a continuing issue with both the Department of Transportation and the MTA. The DOT, although they have lots of things to come to us, they've decided in certain areas that they're going to go other ways and not necessarily come to the community board. They've done that when they've talked about the citywide traffic plan for the next 5 years. They've done that we've asked them a few times to come and report on the BQE, how the changes are taking place. I know that they've made some changes in the last couple of weeks. They've reinstated the right lane from the westbound Tillery onto the Brooklyn Bridge, which had been removed. And they've also changed the timing completely on Atlantic and Flatbush. So we are hopefully that we can get them to continue to cooperate with us as we cooperate with them on issues concerning transportation, public safety, and other kinds of things. Obviously the MTA was supposed to do a report on the York Street station that had been promised in the fall. It's now January, and although they've promised it's coming soon, there's no specific date when we can expect that report to take place. So we looked about setting priorities that would help us in getting people to come speak. We're continuing to those kinds of things. We also talked about how our budget priorities will be set, and also set a timeline for it. The next meeting is scheduled for, I believe, the 18th of February, and we don't have a speaker for it yet, but we're going to look and try to get someone, either the DOT or someone else, to come in. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions someone may have.
Thanks, Sid. Next committee to report is Youth Education and Cultural Affairs.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My co-chair, Dorothea Thompson Manning, I believe, is joining us tonight as well. I have nothing since our last meeting, which I reported out. Our monthly meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, but I do want to reiterate that we have our youth council, and our 4 young people will be attending our Wednesday meeting, and we really look forward to hearing their voice and encouraging their participation. Thank you.
Thank you to all of the chairs and co-chairs for committees to report. The next item on the agenda is other committee business. I'm not aware that we have anything left over, but Carol Ann, is there anything that you and Taya can think of that we need to highlight at this point in the agenda?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Any chair or co-chairs have any items that we need to discuss for committee business? Okay, great. Moving on to community forum. The next item on the agenda, I'd like to start with Esther Blunt. I know Esther had a point she wanted to make earlier. I wanted to hold it because it wasn't part of my chair.
Apologies, Mr. Singletary. I was in an inadvertent mute. Could you rewind 1 sentence and unmute yourself?
Hello?
Apologies, Chair Singletary.
That's all right. Esther, did you hear me?
Yes, I sent you an email.
Oh, okay, cool.
It's nothing, yeah, okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. Mr. Yu.
Yes, I want to make a couple of statements. Back in 2004,
John, just give me 1 second. Before you make a couple of statements, you still got a time limit. So I'm gonna let you be quick.
Mr. Singletary, I I understand what the rules are.
All right.
I've been on this community board for a long time.
I don't need to just remind you. Let's go.
I don't need a reminder.
All right.
2004, we upzoned downtown Brooklyn. The agreement and the community benefits, we got none of them in downtown Brooklyn. But what we did get is a large percentage of homeless, because the community of color and low income downtown Brooklyn was displaced for all of these high-rise buildings. For years, we asked the city planning department to study the results of the upzoning. That has not happened. We have the highest homeless population in the city of New York ever, and there is no plan to solve it. But we have all of these high-rise buildings. Community Board 2 needs to take the reins and make the city understand the results of the policies that have been implemented by the city on the entire population. And the other item, Mr. Singletary, is the report that Mr. Smith made on the low vaccination rate in 11205 is largely a result of the 4 public housing developments that we have in 11205. And there is a plan that I will share with Mr. Smith to give incentives to the folks in the public housing project to get the vaccination. I'm done.
Thank you, John. And the city is also has plans to make sure that the residents in the Walt Whitman, Ingersoll, Farragut, Lafayette Gardens, and to some extension even Atlantic Terminals will be notified of ways to kind of elevate their participation in the vaccine process. So as Mr. Dew just highlighted, there are initiatives that are happening, and the borough president is also, the newly elected borough president is also interested in trying to support and be complimentary there as well. So this is one of the times where everyone in the community, regardless of where you sit, either as a resident or as an elected official or as a stakeholder, can play a part in making sure that we get our community healthier. It's important that we do that and we don't give up. We try to find ways to continue to keep people healthy. Anybody else with any comments in the community forum?
Just want to thank Daughtry Kostarfin for the minutes and work she did in our previous meeting. As you saw, this was a complex meeting that we had, and she did a wonderful job in pulling our minutes and information together.
Got it. Thanks. Mr. John?
Yes, thank you, Lenny. I just want to say, and with what I'm going to say, I have to do the disclaimer that I happen to work for the Department of Social Services, which is comprised of Department of Homeless Services and HRA. But with all due respect, my senior colleague on the board, the city does have a plan to combat homelessness. Clearly, there is a lot of work to do, but now not a member of the board and not as a member of the department, I just want to say that I don't think it's fair that we criticize the current administration for the mistakes of prior administrations. With that, I want to say what a great.
So let me, listen, I'm not here to support either comments from John or John. But I will tell you that if anybody just happens to take a walk under the Verizon building, and if you come along DeKalb Avenue as you're entering the train station, or if you walk along Flatbush before you get to Fulton, that overhang has provided a sense of security and safety from the elements of the weather for those of our neighbors who are homeless. And it has gone through ebbs and flows. There's been a period where prior to being first Deputy Commissioner Lorraine Grillo and former Chief of Department Terrence Moynihan were appointed by the previous mayor, and they put forth an effort to try to engage and get homeless individuals in better conditions, considering the elements of the weather. Now there's a population that is coming back. There are laws on the books, as many of you may know, that require what they call a code blue, so that once it gets to 32 degrees below, that any neighboring hospital or healthcare facility must take in individuals off the street if they require some need or they just want to be warm. Those efforts have always been there, and I don't think that they've changed, but it is important for us to just be aware that those challenges are still existing within our community. And if you just happen to walk through the boundaries of Community Board 2, you will see that these are still areas that require some amplification, and it still requires us to be diligent about how we care for those members of our community who may not have a consistent address and apartment or zip code to go to on a daily basis. So that's just a statement that is, just really to remind us and stay heightened about what is taking place and how we can be supportive. Linda, you have a question?
More of a comment. Last meeting that I attended with the executive committee, I was talking about the traffic issue on Washington Avenue, Myrtle, because of the open streets that runs all the way down to Hall Street. I called DOT, and they're doing oversight on it and reviewing it. And just to let you know, they said other people have called about Willoughby Avenue and it's under review. I spoke to the commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. That's consistent with the same information we received in the board office and the conversation I had with Commissioner Bray. And I plan on having a conversation with Commissioner Bray on some other topics tomorrow. So hopefully we'll get an update that we can disseminate to the community at large, if for no other reason than we can do it at our general body meeting.
And I think it just needs to, because other people had called, I just think they need to take another look at how it's affected other things by actually doing the open streets and sort of like doing a reevaluation at this time. Thanks, Lenny.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'll just remind you that the Transportation and Public Safety Committee has really been focused on this. We've had conversations come out of the leadership of that committee. So
I went to that meeting as well, Lenny, but they told me I should speak with the Fort Greene Open Streets.org or whatever. And I didn't think that I would have much leverage doing that. So I just made a call, like as a regular citizen.
Let me just jump in real quick. My comment wasn't to suggest you do anything other than continue to stay engaged as a community member. But just know that committee of Community Board 2 is really been spending a little bit more time than normal trying to keep a pulse on that as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other comments from the non-executive board members? Hearing none and seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Gordon, Mr. Myers, is there any discussion? I hope not. Good night.
Good night.
Take care.
Yeah, good meeting.